Welcome. We're moving on to Unit 2 of Shanghai Mathematics Practice Book 1.1. We've completed the first unit and now moving on to Unit 2. Again, as mentioned previously, you will need to purchase the book to be able to go through the information, and due to copyright, there'll only be very limited information just to assist in terms of this lesson and the delivery of the lesson. So Unit 2 itself consists of 10 parts. The first part is called number bonds. Number bonds are extremely important and something that needs to pay a lot of attention to, particularly number bonds to 10, which come again and again. But this is like an introduction to the concept of number bonds. So topic 1 is number bonds, and as it previously mentioned, these are generally self-evident. Clearly, your child will need support, but once they are confident, they should be able to do it themselves, and you should encourage them to do them themselves. If they're making a lot of mistakes, then I would advise them to slow down, but clearly some mistakes will be made, but hopefully over time things will improve, particularly with maths, there's a lot of repetition and it's more about building confidence. So question 1, fill in the numbers to make 9. So this is a number bond for 9, and as you can see in the first example, 0 goes with 9 because added together they make 9. 1 plus 8 makes 9. 2 plus 7 makes 9, and so on and so forth. And you will see children work differently, but a lot of the time they will see patterns and go along with the pattern, and there's no issue in terms of how they do that. In terms of how they are counting at the moment, they will be and should be encouraged to use their fingers to help with the counting. That's the stage they should be at. If they're at a higher stage, then that don't require numbers and they are accurate, and that's really a bonus. But they should be, for this book, be using the hands to count. Question 2 is to do with guessing the hidden numbers, and again this is demonstrating number bonds, and again the first example is given, which is 5. 3 in one hand, and how many would need to be in the other hand to make 5, and you could use fingers instead. So if 3 fingers are held up, how many fingers need to be held up to make 5, and so on and so forth. And the advantage of using fingers here is that obviously we have 10 fingers, and so for up to 10 it should be fairly straightforward to use that. And then you've got the same issue with regards to number bonds for 8 and 3 and 7. Number 3 is again a continuation of that, but importantly showing them where the number is important. So for example, the first question, number 6, there's a 5 on the right hand side, and so how much more is needed to make 6? So the top number is the total that need to be made, and so on and so forth. And you can see for the other examples, like for the 10, there are options available, and they can put any numbers that they wish to put in there in order to get there. For the ones below that, 2 and 5, and then they make one number, it's just the same thing, just flipped over. So in this case, the 2 and 5 in combination will make the number 7 at the bottom, and so on and so forth. And again, you can see from the other questions there are a variety of ways of doing this. And for question 10, the 2 numbers that make up 10, and then the 2 numbers that make up, and so on and so forth. For this one, obviously it is better to start from the end of the 1 to 1, so make 1 to 1 makes 2, and then take it from there. And the other numbers, clearly there are options available that can be put in there, but need to be accurate. And again, in the answer scheme, there's probably a lot of possibilities, so you need to just check yourselves with regards to that. Question 4, draw lines to join the pairs of numbers that make 10. Again, self-evident, but as I mentioned before, number bonds to 10 extremely important, and something that's going to be repeated again and again. And if your child is struggling with that, they may need to do additional work with that, but you'll find that later on if the number of practice is enough. Usually it is enough, but some child finds certain things difficult and may need more practice. Generally, in my opinion, as long as you do the work a short amount on a regular basis, the child should pick up. What often is the difficulty is people do quite a lot, but not frequently enough, and so the child can often forget what they have learned before, and so you don't seem to be making progress. It's generally speaking little but often, and with lots of encouragement and building up their confidence. As generally speaking, the information should be straightforward. Moving on to the next part, which is addition, and again, as mentioned, there should be straightforward. So these are numbers that are added together to make the total. So for the example, first one, they've shown you that, so the number of coins on the left is 5, so there you got 5 there, and then next to that is obviously 3, and then the total how much, and then below that is just showing that we can reverse the order. So in this case 3 plus 5 would also make the same, and just getting them familiar with that concept, and the same would apply for the others. So first one is 2 plus 3 makes 5, and then the other way around can be reversed as well below it, and so on and so forth. And then that concept just continues from coins onto circles, but the same concept applies. And question 2 is linking. Again, the point of this is just to demonstrate to the child from a very early age that with addition, it doesn't matter which order we do it in, whether it's 3 plus 7 equals 10 or 7 plus 3, the answer will still be 10. So the order in which we add things doesn't make a difference in terms of addition, and this can be demonstrated with fingers if that's required. Moving on to the next page, it's page 21 here. How many dots are there altogether? Again, should be fairly straightforward. 3 are black dots, black circles, and 7 are the white circles, and so on and so forth. And so the one after that, 5 again. Again, with these questions, the first one is normally done, and so it should be fairly straightforward. But if there are any issues, then please do write them down in the comments, and we can go over them in the next lesson if appropriate, or I can make a separate lesson to clarify any issues, although in these books it should be fairly straightforward, but as I said, with input from parents. Number 2 is calculate. Again, just working out 3 plus 4 equals 7. Again, the child is getting introduced to addition and also mathematical terms like addition, calculate, and altogether, which has been mentioned before. Again, your child will struggle to be able to read this, but over time, with repetition, they should be familiar with the words. Number 3, look at the picture, write the number sentences, and calculate. So there's various ways of doing this. So there are options. So you can just look at the top row and add it to the bottom row. You could look at the different colored ones. So there are different combinations that can be used, but the total should be the same. And again, this is just showing the child different ways of calculation and different ways of sorting as well in this particular case. Next page, which is page 22, calculation. Again, should be straightforward. Introducing 0, which is very important. Number 2, write the missing numbers in the boxes. Again, getting them familiarized with these concepts, which will come again and again. So 2 plus 1 equals 3. Another way of writing that is 2 plus 1 with an arrow, which will also be 3. And they're just familiarizing them with this. And then number 20, page 23, question 3. Describe each picture, write the number sentences, and calculate the answer. So the number sentence is important. So the square boxes will be where the numbers are, and then the circle will be what tool as such will be used. So in this case, will be a plus, because we're working out how many birds are there now. So this is about addition. And for the other question, you got there were. At the start, there were 2 tigers. Another 6 tigers arrived. How many tigers are there now? So again, 2 in the first box, addition, and then 6, and then the total there. Moving on to the next part, which is describe and calculate. Again, there's a lot of repetition here. So even if your child is struggling initially, they should be getting familiar. And with a lot of repetition, you will know that they're ready with the material when they can go through the material quite quickly themselves. And should encourage that. Obviously, double check the work and be there, particularly at the beginning if it's required, and also to ensure that they are doing their work and utilizing their time well. So 1A, 1B, 1C, as I say, should be straightforward. With C, as I say, there's different options of how to do it in terms of color, and as I say, just to familiarize them with the reverse also being true. So 4 plus 6 and 6 plus 4 are also possibilities there. And then calculation for part question 2. Your child may just realize there's a pattern to how they are there, and hence may not actually be doing the calculation on their fingers. I don't see any issues with that. The point is getting the right answers, and looking at patterns is actually one of very good ways of doing maths, and should be encouraged. Or if they realize themselves, which they probably will do after a while, that there's a quicker way of doing things, that's not a problem at all. Moving on from addition, we move on to subtraction, and getting them used to the term minus or take away. Again, whichever way you prefer to do it. and this with 9 at the start, 3 tadpoles took away some away, so now minus 9 minus 3, which how much they are equal. Again, if they need to count the pictures, it's not a problem at the end. At this stage, it's more about counting, whether they're using their fingers. That's not an issue. It's just getting them familiar with the numbers. Later on, yes, they should not be using their fingers, but we'll talk about that at that stage. But that's only once they build up their confidence, and when they're very familiar with the number bonds and these additions and subtractions, which occur again and again. That would be the stage when using fingers will not be appropriate, as it's quite a slow method as well as counting. But at the moment, this is how to do it, and it's absolutely fine. It should be encouraged to build up their confidence. Again, similar process with question 20 on page 26, the second part of question 1. Question 2, fill in the missing numbers. Again, should be fairly straightforward. Simple subtractions there, and again calculate, and that will indicate to them. Calculate simply means work out and can be used for a variety of different questions, including for addition and subtraction. Moving on to page 28, describe each picture, write the number sentences and calculate the answer. So again, we'll need help in terms of reading, and it's also important for the child at this very early age to see the relationship between what is said and how to then make out a question from that in terms of a number sentence where appropriate, and then answer it from there. Number 2, read each question, write the number sentences and calculate the answer. So you can see they're starting off with 5, and then there are 2. How many are there? There are 5. Okay, sorry, there are 5 pens and 2 pencil and 1 pencil. Okay, so there are 5 pens and something in total. There are 2 pencils, so there are 2 pencils. How many pens are there? Okay, so it took me a while to work that out myself. So there are 5 in total. There are 2 other pencils, so how many pens there will be? So they're getting them familiar with this kind of language. So it'll be 5. Take away the 2 pencils, so that will remain you with your number of pens there, and so on and so forth. And number 3, fill in the missing numbers. 7 take away 2 is 5, and so on and so forth. Again, the first one is done, so it should be straightforward. And then calculations with regards to simple subtractions. Moving on to part 5, describe and calculate. Again, from the pictures, you can see what is happening in terms of the 1A, where there are originally how many fishes and how many have been eaten away and how many are left. And then the B is another question, although it is perhaps not so straightforward what they are trying to show. How many are taken away? I mean, one of them had their eyes closed, so I perhaps will go with 4, take away 1, but sometimes it's not clear, and in that case it's not really that important to get the right answer. It's just a case of getting the right calculation, and that's the same with on page 31. And then you got question 2, calculate and write the number sentences. So getting them familiar with all together, so that's the total. If 4 of them are babies, how many are adults? So again, these will be simple subtractions. And if it's the case the child is struggling, if that means using objects or toys to demonstrate it, then that's fine as well, because they need to understand the relationship between what is said in terms of words and also in terms of how that is translated into writing mathematical terms, mathematical numbers, and then working out and calculating. And then number 3, calculation, but these calculations are in a different order, so they won't just be able to use patterns to work it out, and they will need to work it out. Again, if they're using their fingers, that's not an issue to do that, and I probably advise using fingers at this stage to be able to get the right answer. Moving on to 6, addition and subtraction. So this is now a combination of both, and again showing the pattern between the two. So 5 plus 4 will be 9, and if we want to get 9 to a smaller number back to the original is minus 4. An important concept, particularly at this stage, to teach a child is, and you may feel straightforward, but I think it's a very important concept that should be taken further on, is that first of all, work out, does the number get bigger? If the number gets bigger, how do we make things bigger? Well, we make things bigger by adding. Does the number, or in the other way around, if we work out, okay, first question is, does the number that we want going to be smaller than the one we started off with? If that's the case, then in this case, we're going to have to take away. And again, this teaches this concept there, then the relationship between numbers, then number 2, filling the missing numbers, and number 3, showing a combination of really what's been done before. So this might be a little bit more trickier for your child, but it's just demonstrating what's already been done. So if a circle is a particular number and a triangle is a different number, and then the total would be a star, then if you had a star, what would we have to take away to get the circle? If they are finding this a little bit confusing, you can say uh, that the circle could be any number. So and advise them to pick a number because it should work for all situations. And then a triangle as another number, and so on and so forth. And then what's left over would be a number, and then that number would translate as the triangle. And they should be more familiar with that. Moving on to part 7. And this is a combination of both of them, but using a number line and number lines and how to use them. And they're showing you there how to do it with 1a, where the number sentence of 1 plus 4, and you get equals 5. And you need to check whether what's written and what's the answer is correct or not. So, for example, 1a would be correct because 1 plus 4, there's 4 steps taken, we'll get to 5. Whereas b, 3, if it's 3 and you took 4 steps, would you get to 8? So they can just count how many steps were there. Were there actually 4 steps? And if it's not actually 4 steps, then it's a cross, and so on and so forth. And then number 2, you again utilize that information to work out the answer. So for example, question 2, the first one, you start at 2. What number, how many steps do we take to get to 8? And that'll be in the plus box. And then we write the number sentence in total, which would be 2 plus 6 equals 8, and so on and so forth. And then you got games about number 10, which is part 8, calculation 5 plus 5. So the number 10 is extremely important, and this is reminding them regarding number bonds, which I believe will be covered again and again. So this is very important to emphasize again and again. At this stage, number bonds to 10 are extremely important. So calculation there, filling the missing numbers there, again getting the child to know the relation between the two, and then moving on to part number 9, which is combining the two, adding 3 numbers and subtracting 2 numbers. So introducing that addition can be done more than once, and it should be straightforward. 1a has been done before, and b is just introducing that you can take 2 steps. So 2 plus 1 will give you 3, then plus 4 will give you 7, and so on and so forth. And number 2 is another example of that, where by picture terms we can add the numbers together to find out how many total flowers were there in the first one, and so on and so forth. And then page 36, you obviously need to read. So you can say there were 6 cars, 1 car drove away. So if 1 car drove away, and this is the important concept of adding and takeaway, knowing which one to do. So if 1 car drove away, will there be less cars left or more cars left? Your child should know there'll be less. And if they're having difficulties with that, you can even have 6 toy cars or 6 marbles and show 1 go away. The more or less, if it's less, then they know it's going to be takeaway, and that'll be a good step for them. And then below that, it's a number line again. And if it's 1, if you're going, make sure you look at the arrows. So the arrows are going to the right, which means it's adding. And if the arrows, which you can see on the one below it, moving to the left, it means takeaway. So for the one below, the number you start off with is 9, and then you're working way down because it's a takeaway. And then question 3 on page 37, addition again should be straightforward, 1 step at a time. What's already been done, 1 step at a time can be done. And question 4 is drawing the lines so that the answer connects to the right picture. So 10 minus 3 minus 6, that'll be 7 minus 6, which is 2 steps. So 10 minus 3, how much is that? 7. If they need to cross that bit out and write it at the top because they're struggling to remember, that's not a problem. And then 7 take away 6 is 1, and then they can connect to the right one, and so on and so forth. And remember, there are 6 and 8 and zeros at the 1 as well. And then finally, the last topic within here is to do with question 10, which is mixed addition and subtraction, which is a combination of both. Question 1 should be straightforward. Question 2, describe what's happened at the beginning. So at the start, there are 9 people in the bus, 3 people get off. So would that be more or less? That would be less. So that needs to be 9 minus 3. And then 2 two people get on the bus. If people get on the bus, it's going to be more or less. It's obviously going to be more, so we add 2, and then they can do the calculations that they've done before. And then finally, question 3 and question 4 is about calculations. And should be straightforward. Remember that 0 can be an answer, but the answer should always be positive clearly at this stage, but includes 0. So with that, we'll end, and hopefully I'll have another video soon. Moving on to Unit 3. As I mentioned before, there are only 5 units there. Please do subscribe and like, and place comments at the bottom, and please share as well if you feel that other people will find this information useful. Thank you for your time.